Right, good afternoon, everyone. Really delighted to be here for this afternoon session, Innovative Impact Investment Tools, the Impact Bond. And what better place to have it, in this beautiful city of Istanbul, a city that we know has always been at the crossroads of new ideas, exchange, and interactions. So I really want to commend the organizing committee for really bringing together such a diverse panel. We've got people from Delhi, India, from the UK, from Flanders, Belgium, and of course, in Turkey here. And I'm from the planet Mars. So before we dive in, I'm so aware, okay, it's after lunch, you're digesting your meals, the oxygen is going to your stomach, not your brains. So stand up, everyone. Don't worry, I'm not going to make you do star jumps or anything. Stand up, everyone, okay? Including my panelists, you are everyone. Right, remain standing if you know what an impact bond is. Okay, so stay standing up if you know what an impact bond is. Those who don't know what an impact bond is, you can sit down. Wow. I'm glad all my panelists are still standing. Otherwise, you would be in trouble. Well, this is really good. Okay, thank you so much. You can sit down now. A bit of movement after lunch is always good, I think. But, just looking at that, I'm impressed by how many of you know impact bonds. Maybe that's why you're here in an afternoon session. But there were people who don't know about it, and maybe those who know what impact bonds are, you have varying levels of awareness and understanding, right? So that's the work cut out for us panelists. So maybe I'd like to kick off with Ian first, because you have done a lot of work in this area, and I know you're always very mindful to make the work accessible, understandable, and ta-da! He's done things like that fit into any lady's handbags, so you can actually carry it on the metro and read it. So nifty little guides that make things simple. But just so you know, he hasn't paid me to do product placement, okay? This is a really useful guide. So over to you, Ian. Tell us, why are we even here today to talk about impact bonds? Why are these important, and what are they?
Okay. Thank you, EYDK, for organizing this magnificent and inspirational event. And thank you, Chih, for the challenge to explain social impact bonds within a time frame of 5 minutes. I'll do my best. What helps is that it was mentioned yesterday a few times, social impact bonds, but what is it exactly, and why should we use it? How should we use it? How should we implement it? That's a question. So with state budgets stretched due to COVID measurements, due to climate, energy, and international conflicts, the rest budget is really shrunk enormously. And that needs to be spent well. So in long-term investments in complex or unpredictable social and societal challenges, they come under pressure. And there is a danger that vulnerable citizens, groups, people in need may fall out without support. And that we do not want. So it will come to do more with less. But let me rephrase it, achieve more with less. That's the key. So in an environment where public spendings are under high rationalization, it will come to new mechanisms to put in place and to maximize the impact of those public spendings. In order to do so, we are looking at equal and constructive partnerships, and we want to bridge the gap between the government, the investing market, and the social service sector to create social impact and to support economical recovery. So to make such public-private partnerships profitable, there is a need for a new structures, new configurations to frame this idea, and we need viable investment environments to create this. So you all know within the outcome-based contracting, the payment by results, and it works very well. But what happens if we don't know what the possible outcome may be, or we don't know which possible methodology may work? Then we talk about social impact bonds. So I still have a few minutes. So what's a social impact bond? It's a public-private partnership between a government, a service provider, and an investor to create impact. To test alternative, innovative methodologies, there where we don't have any clue what the possible outcome may be, and the impact with success is substantial. So this all pre-financed by an investor who will bear the financial risk of capital. Let me make myself clear with an example. When the government wants to get 100 unemployed people into the labor market, they outsource the task. So a service provider will start working with those people, set up trainings, and at the end maybe 50 or 60 will find a job. But they will send an invoice of 100 trainings to the government. We need to rentabilize this mechanism. We're losing too much capital here. So within a SIP, the idea stays the same, but here a private investor will pre-finance the whole project. The success ratios will be negotiated, and for example, here we talk about the success if 80 out of those 100 find a job. Then, and only then, if those successes are achieved, the government will refund the investor with an interest, return on investment. So where do we get the refund? That's the working cost budgeted within the government. But where do we get the interest? And that makes it really interesting. That is, if those 80 people really get a job, the government will not have to pay unemployment fee anymore. And that is a huge benefit for the government. So it's a win-win-win for all parties. The government wins because the problem is solved. The investor wins because he invested in a social issue and he got a return on it. The service providers create impact. And last but not least, the impacted population will have a quality of life, will have a better life at the end. So it's applicable of all sorts of sectors. The very first was in the UK on within justice, on reintegrating recidivism, but even so in healthcare or in welfare, there are SIPs. There is one in Hiroshima to conquer cancer. There is one in India to get young girls back to school. Even though there are recently 2 environmental impact bonds, so even saving the environment of our planet found its way to social impact bonds. But the most impact bonds are within employment. I work mainly on employment, and I'm now working on the structural framework to facilitate the implementation. So for me, social impact bond is a tool to create a dynamic between the investors world and the social service provider sector. If those 2 worlds start working together to create impact, then the sky is the limit, anything is possible.
I like the win-win-win situation that you described above, and congratulations to all of you in Turkey that have launched your first social impact bond on tackling youth unemployment. It's really, really exciting. So it's about bringing in this private external capital upfront to pay for things, stimulate collaborative innovation, really to transform lives, tackling really entrenched social problems, and then the outcome payer, usually the government, not always, then pays back the investor with interest. So that's a very clear explanation. I think now I'd like to come to Andreea, if I might, for a more zoomed out view, because the Government Outcomes Lab, where you're from, at the University of Oxford, is the preeminent international center for excellence on all things impact bond and social outcomes, right? So can you talk us through where did this come from and what does the international picture look like?
Thank you, Hoong, and good afternoon, everyone. First of all, just let me express my gratitude to Shafak and to EYDK for hosting us. It's been 2 incredible days. I've learned a lot. At the Government Outcomes Lab, we gather evidence on impact bonds and other outcomes-based contracting models around the world, but also crucially, we learn from practitioners. And yesterday, I've learned a lot, and it's been really interesting to hear how the impact investing landscape is developing in Turkey, and also encouraging to see the level of interest from government here. Hoong, you've kindly asked me to share a few words from the experience in the UK and internationally as well. So you've literally given me 5 minutes to distill about 8 years. This is the time I've worked in impact bonds, learning both from the UK and internationally. So I'll do my best. And actually, I don't want to throw a lot of numbers at people. I think everyone seems to be fairly familiar with the impact bond model. And Ian and Hoong, you did a brilliant job explaining it. I think also most people know that impact bonds were first developed in the UK. And Nick Hurd yesterday gave a really excellent overview of the big picture policy context. So at the time, a lot of commitment from central government to help nurture the impact investing ecosystem in the UK. Also a real commitment to experimenting with what we call in the UK payment by results. So this idea of in public contracting, linking payment to specific outcomes that are being achieved. And UK has had decades of experience with that. And the third, I think, key element in the UK context when the experimentation with impact bonds started was the commitment from government to support voluntary sector organizations, or non-profit organizations, to be part of this social program. So I think understanding these 3 key factors is really important in the UK context. Now, over the years, we've been approached by governments around the world to share the UK's experience with impact bonds, and we love doing that, and we love talking about that, but I think the local context is really, really important. So we believe in sharing learning, connecting practitioners and government officials across the board. But I think ultimately you need to start with understanding the local context, the local players, the local problems, and so on. And I think from the discussions over the past 2 days, I'm confident that this is happening. So just to give you very briefly a flavor of the scale, I suppose, of the adoption of impact bonds, because we talk a lot about experimentation, but actually, we've been experimenting for 15 years, nearly 15 years. So actually, in the community of practice, I think we're starting to actually say, how do we institutionalize outcomes? How do we institutionalize this way of working? So it's not just about the one pilot. And again, I would love to see what happens in Turkey and how we move from one pilot to actually a sort of outcome-led practice, I guess, working across sectors. So there are currently 282 impact bond projects across the world. About 100 of those are in the UK, but loads more across the world, and it never ceases to amaze me how from places like Japan to Colombia, South Africa, India, Turkey, and so on, different contexts, different countries find something interesting and helpful in that mechanism and manage to apply it to very different welfare contexts, economic contexts, and so on. So that the technical definition is really important, but I think it's also important to understand that there's a set of principles or practices that underpin this mechanism. And it's not about taking the sort of like textbook impact bond and applying it to different contexts. It's understanding, in my opinion, the kind of what are the levers of impact. Is it the fact that we're very data-led and monitoring performance really, really tightly and then using that to inform how we're delivering services? Is it that we're tapping into the additional expertise that impact investors can bring into these partnerships? So what is it within the mechanism that we think it's helpful for us? I think that's something very important to keep in mind. And then I guess variation is maybe something that I want people to take away from this discussion more than remembering numbers. No to social impact bonds from what I can tell. Okay, I haven't looked at each of the 300 impact bonds in the world, but it seems to me from my experience that no two impact bonds are the same. Of course, there's a lot of building, developing from one pilot, one project to another, but the evolution's been really, really fascinating. And I know we're going to hear more from the actual doers who can give you a flavor as to why these things look in practice. But I say this hopefully to inspire people, because sometimes organizations come to us and say, oh, what have other organizations done? What metrics did they use? Da, 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 da. And I'm like, this is helpful, but don't try to replicate, adapt, add your sort of local flavor, if you like. I think someone said yesterday, Turkeyify. That's what my recommendation would be. And then maybe a final thing, and then maybe if we have time for further remarks, I'll come back, is this point about evolution. I think in the impact bond community of practice, we've been saying for, well, at least since I joined this community 8 years ago, that impact bond is the wrong name, because they're not a bond in the sort of like financial, as a financial instrument. And what I've seen over the last few years is a shift from talking about these instruments as sort of like financial instruments to talking about them as partnerships. So in the UK, more and more we're talking about social outcome partnerships as opposed to impact bonds, because I think that's a more accurate way to actually reflect the dynamics and ways of working within a impact bonds, but it also creates confusion. So I think for the purposes of this discussion, I think we're going to stick to impact bonds. But from our discussions with government officials and practitioners, that the partnership working, the collaboration across sectors, and a collaboration very much led by data, always comes up as one of the most valuable elements of working in this way. Let me stop there, because otherwise I can go on and on and on. But I hope that's a helpful overview of some of the reflections I guess we've gathered over the past few years.
Thanks, Andreea. And I think my takeaways from that is adaptability. It's not a fixed model, and it's very important to bespoke and localize it. In all the panels we've been hearing for the past 2 days, this localization thing is so important. And the impact bond principles, that's what they're a set of principles. They're not fixed mechanisms. Be creative with them. Start with a problem. What are you trying to solve? Don't start with a solution looking for a problem. You know, I always say if you give a child a hammer, everything in the world looks like a nail. It'll just bash everything. Start with a problem. I think that's the message I hear from you. On this topic of localization, I think, Shafak, this is where I want to bring you in, because you are such a leading light in this ecosystem. Can you talk us through some of your experiences and learning about trying to get this going in an ecosystem that's fairly new to this?
Yes, sure. Thank you for the question, Chih. And I'm so glad to have you here, all of you. Well, you're introducing a new concept to a country, and you need investment readiness, right, in all aspects. You need legislation, you need awareness, you need readiness, in short, in all aspects. And today, in today's world, every country has a SDG agenda. We have to. And in the Turkish context, research tells us that Turkey has 5 themes for impact investing, which are women empowerment, renewables, refugee livelihoods, health tech, and financial inclusion. So we have to, when answering such a broad question, I think we need to frame it first. So this is the top of the pyramid. And then if we come down, there is a development plan, which includes sustainable development in our plan. And then if you come down, you have the strategy documents of the different government agencies, including the ministries and all the agencies who are in operation to provide these public services. And there we go. In those strategy documents, you basically see the social problems that you need to tap as a government agency. So I think reading all of these documents, going through them, tells us or told us what to do. And in the Turkish experience, it wasn't easy. It took us 2.5 years to make this happen. It started with EBRD's announcement for a bit to run a feasibility study and bond structuring for youth unemployment, for the young population who are not in education, in employment and training. And then Dalberg kicked in, and Etkiyap was also the enabler, the local partner as an enabler. And it took us 18 months to do the feasibility study and the bond structuring. And that also includes the education part, you know, because when we went to the government agencies, we had to in a way, educate, I do not want to say educate, but inform them about this new concept and bring them to the point that they want to invest in this as an outcome payer, you know, pay for the outcomes. And after 18 months, Bridges was with us as an investor. Amit is here. We worked very closely in the project. And it took us 7 months to negotiate with the outcome payer to start to sign the contract and to launch the project. So yeah, it wasn't easy. It wasn't quick because it was the first time. This was the first pilot. But now there is knowledge. There is a will from the government side. Interest to do more, and even other government agencies and local governments are coming to us to do more on different subjects, and I will tap on the second part of it. Maybe you're going to go to the audience to ask.
Well, it's to pick up that point you said about it takes a team. You know, and Andreea, you've mentioned that as well, partnerships. And that really highlights, we often think of these tools as technical things. You know, it's about the data, it's about the design. But what you guys have just talked about there is it's deeply relational. Get the relational work done in partnerships, build trust. That's so important. And Shafak, you've alluded to the fact that we actually have the unique opportunity today because 2 of your partners are actually, I believe, in the audience. Could I ask Mustafa Karabashi first to just describe to us and the audience about what motivated you to want to be part of this impact bond?
Hi all, I am Mustafa Karabashi from Istanbul Development Agency. First of all, I would like to thank to Şafak Hanım and EYDK and Etkiyap colleagues for raising awareness on impact investing in Turkey and for organizing the first conference here in Istanbul. First of all, I need to mention that global societal, social and environmental challenges like climate change, long-lasting crisis, migration, those are much bigger than used to be and needs collective action to tackle with. When we look at the public sources allocated to tackle with those challenges all over the world, especially public sources seem scarce, especially in the developing and underdeveloped world. And in that sense, we need to merge public sources with the private ones to tackle with these challenges. In this context, in this regard, social impact bonds stand out as a very useful, very crucial financing instrument. Why, as the public sector, are we interested in these bonds? First of all, I want to mention a little bit what we do in Istanbul as Istanbul Development Agency. We define regional priorities together with the local and national partners with a shared wisdom and in line with the national priorities, as Şafak Hanım said, in line with the national development plans. Then we try to finance some of those priorities with different financing mechanisms. Till now, we mostly use project calls, or grant calls. In those calls, we launch calls with a set of defined priorities and a set of potential applicants. We receive the project proposals. Independent evaluators, independent assessors evaluate those proposals, and those found successful we signed contracts with them, and immediately afterwards, we nearly pay half of the project budget as advanced payment, even before the kickoff. And in this model, in the grant model, we are financing inputs and activities, but either because of the possibility of ill-defined project actions, or how can I say, the poor evaluation, those inputs and activities may not always lead to expected outputs and outcomes. So in this model, the public sector is bearing the inherited project risks and initial investment. But in social impact bonds, we have these good folks who are interested in global challenges and who are ready to undertake the initial investment and bear the risks. Secondly, in this three-pot model, we have the outcome payer, impact investor, and the delivery partner. The delivery partner, or service provider, they work in an isolated environment and only responsible to the public sector for delivering the outcomes with the proving documents. So this model gives them a flexibility, and for the public sector, we are saving resources, especially human resources, because we are not interested in the daily operation of the projects. We are not interested in the monitoring of the projects. We just want to see the outcomes. So for these two reasons, these are really very important for us. And here I would like to thank to Bridge, Amit, for their really very kind support in every phase of our first social impact bond. And I would like also to thank to Enokta and Tobeto teams, our delivery partners, for their kind support during implementation. Thank you.
Thank you. And I believe that we've got a colleague, Echmal Ayro from Enokta Tobeto. Yeah.
Yeah. This is Ejmal Ayra. Thank you for this opportunity, for your trust, and also for the mic. And so I represent Tobeto, which is a division of Enokta. With Istanbul Kodluyor, we have a different triangle of win-wins, actually. You know, you have in your triangle, you have the government, you have the delivery partner, and the, Bridges, which is the investor. We have yet another triangle, which is composed of the talent, the companies, and ourselves. So the problem we solve, we solve it with the model we call head farming, not head hunting, because there is no one to hunt when it comes to people with digital skills. So you need to grow them first. So we are used to do that throughout our whole existence, developing skills for people. But then matching them with companies in need of them is yet another challenge for us. So this is what we do now. We started with attracting 20,000 people, NEETs, and then they filtered themselves to go down to 1,000, and now we train them, and these certified people, we don't call them junior, but junior plus, because they have more qualities, let's say. So now we have the challenge of placing them, 400 of them within a year, so we'll make it happen. So thank you for this opportunity, and I thank you not only for my company, but also for Turkey for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think it's very refreshing and inspiring to hear the outcome payer, the service provider, really united in this shared purpose. People have been talking about shared values, shared purpose, this complete commitment to transforming lives, to improving lives, to outcomes, which actually you mentioned triangle, nice segue, unplanned by the way, to bring me to the investor in the picture, Amit. So can you talk us through, because obviously you played such a key role in driving the development of the program. Can you talk us through that experience and some of the learning you've had?
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Hoong, and thanks, Shafak and EYDK for having us here today. It's fantastic. And Shafak, we've been working together for a long time now, so it's a great journey to have got here. I mean, in terms of the development of this project, I've got to say we've worked on 75 of these kind of what we call outcomes partnerships, what you're calling impact bonds. And this has been one of the most straightforward to get to market. And I think that's partly because of the amazing work that Dalberg, Etkiyap and others did alongside the Ministry of Industry and Technology and the Istanbul Regional Development Agency prior to us joining. But from the point we came on board, it was actually one of the fastest programs to go from us seeing it to signing of contracts. So it didn't feel that way probably to everyone involved, but it was an incredibly smooth process. And it boils down to, I think, what everybody has mentioned, I think you started talking about, which is partnerships. And I think right from the off, we had an incredibly open, frank, honest, clear and trust-based relationship with the ministry and with the regional development agency. So I think Tuqba Hanum, who's in the room somewhere, you can put your hand up, and Fatma Hanum from the regional development agency, who was here yesterday. I don't know if anyone got the chance to meet her, were the key figures there, and we would kind of meet almost on a weekly basis to work through with the Etkiyap team what this could look like, how it could work, what the structure of this should be. And through that process, I think we built some very, very strong relationships. Sort of once that had happened, we then actually went out to figure out who was going to deliver this thing. And so we ran an open process there's a lot of organizations doing training for young people in Turkey. And we ran an open process, and that's when we met Ejmel and the team. And we really loved their head farming model and actually their kind of very thoughtful approach to curriculum delivery. And jointly with the ministry and with the Regional Development Agency, we made the call to the very brilliant call to bring them on board to be the delivery organization on this program. And again, that process of working together to make that decision, I think, has created some really, really strong relationships. And it's not although we have contractual relationships, actually it doesn't feel that way. It's about working together. We work very closely with Mustafa Bey here. We've had to make some changes to the contract because certain things didn't work that well, and the development agency has been open to all those changes, and there's been common sense at play, and that's the most kind of valuable thing we can have. Similarly with the Tibeto team, there's been some things that have worked incredibly well and other things that have been more challenging, and we've had very frank, open discussions with the team and working through what those challenges are. And that's the beauty of an impact bond or an outcomes partnership is you see what's working and what's not working, and you can change things as you go. You're not delivering a specific model, you're working towards the outcomes that you're being asked to deliver. So in our case, the outcomes are supporting young people to get through training, which is a small part of the outcomes, but then the big part of the outcomes is then placing those people into jobs and those people sustaining those jobs for 6 months. So we've done incredibly well on the first of those outcomes, as Ejmel Bey mentioned. But we're now kind of at that point now where we're starting to deliver the employment outcomes, and we're ahead of schedule, but there's a long way to go. So still lots of work to go. All the partners in the room. And no, it's been a fantastic journey of design and development here, and I hope we can kind of keep that going in Turkey. It was a really kind of smooth experience compared to some of the other processes we've been through.
Thanks so much. I really like the fact that we're bringing in different audience members, even with show of hands, where are you? So, you all deserve such warm congratulations. It takes a whole team to do this. And this really reminds me, I always used to go telling people there are 3 T's you need to remember: time, trust, tenacity. Shafak, you really exemplified the time issue. How much time it takes to really build that collective understanding. What is this? What is this thing called impact bond or outcomes partnership? What is the problem we're trying to solve? You have to build that collective understanding, and that takes time. What you've just said, Amit, brilliantly, is trust. You can't be that flexible with contracts if there's no trust, right? Because everyone usually is so wanting to avoid risk, but you have done the trust thing. So the third T, looking forward, is tenacity. you have to keep at it. Okay? These are complex social problems we're trying to solve. I don't know why people say, it's so difficult and complicated. I always say if it's easy, you would have done it already. You wouldn't have needed an impact bond to help you try to solve the problem. These are inherently different problems. So sticking with that partnership point, just coming to the last partner that's played a key role, Gagandeep, in this impact bond. But I think you also bring a wider perspective because you're not only working on this impact bond, but you're also working on some other impact bonds in the wider region. So can you talk us through some of your considerations about working in the Turkey context, and what are some of the things that you have become aware of?
Thank you so much for that question. Before I answer that, I just wanted to pick on one thing, Ian, that you had started off with. You said impact bonds are a mechanism where we can achieve more with less, right? And I just want to share this example that in 2022, we finished the implementation of the Quality Education India Impact Bond in India, which had run for 4 years. It was a $10 million impact bond. It funded 4 delivery organizations. And on that point of achieving more with less, these implementing organizations were actually also being funded by outcome funders in grant-based settings before. Same models, same organization, same models. What we saw in the impact bond is that the same organizations actually achieved 50% higher outcomes, and half of that time period of that 4 years was during COVID, when schools were actually shut down. And that is because of the flexibility and the outcomes orientation that these partnerships sort of provide. So just wanted to share that initially. Now in terms of what we see in Turkey, so we started this journey about a year ago around doing a feasibility study of an impact bond that looks at skilling for the green economy, right? So how do you skill youth that are not in education, employment, and training, but you skill them for jobs that are in sectors which are related to the green economy. And we wanted to set this up in the MENAT region, but we were not sure of which market to really go after. And Turkey is one of the markets that we prioritized, and there were 3 reasons for that, right? One is that we had seen precedents of impact bonds happening in Turkey before, but precedence is not the only point, right? It is also precedence with government participation, which actually we have not seen in markets outside of US, UK, developed regions. Outside of that, government participation has sort of barely happened in impact bonds. In India, I've been a part of 4 such structures. It's been, government procuring on the basis of outcomes is something that we have said that, it's not going to happen in the next 10 years. We have had those conversations, right, in the past as well. So one is precedence of doing something like this, but then also doing it with government participation, which was very exciting. And then, having been in this room over the last 2 days, I felt that, it is a very good decision that we had actually ended up making in prioritizing Turkey as one of the markets, because the sort of energy and the excitement that, we have seen in the room and the work that EYDK and everyone is doing is so fascinating and refreshing. So that was, one reason, precedence, government participation, so on and so forth. Second were reasons which were specific to the problem that we were trying to solve, which is skilling for the green economy. For that, you need 2 things. You need skilling providers, and you need a green economy, right? So, and this space is fairly nascent. Green economy, skilling for that is a fairly nascent space. And we wanted to test whether there are skilling providers who may have not been doing this work before because it's a fairly nascent space, but are they keen and interested to, do something of this sort and in an outcome-based manner? And we were able to have conversations with, credible skilling providers who were very keen to jump onto this train along with us. So that's one, skilling. And then the other part is the green economy, right? So amongst all the markets that we had considered, we were looking at what is the potential for jobs in the green sectors. And again, Turkey stood out over there. I know that, for example, now, again, I recently heard that there are some standards that are coming out which require organizations and companies to actually publish reports and, you know, do better on sustainability, so on and so forth. So again, a lot of the factors that we had originally thought of are getting, you know, just reinforced. And I am feeling very happy, at least after these 2 days, that you know, yes, maybe we can structure something like this, right? I know we are also thinking of potentially expanding the, you know, pilot that's going on around digital skills. So maybe digital and green skills can be combined into, you know, future skills and you know, a more, you know, larger sort of a structure can be set up. So I'll just pause here.
Thanks so much, Gagandeep. I love the excitement because people are already thinking ahead, right? It's like, there's no point just doing a pilot and going nowhere. You need the commitment and buy-in from people that I think all of you alluded to, but also thinking ahead and, you know, this outcomes ecosystem. You're not just doing project, you're trying to change your ecosystem to be more outcomes oriented. On that note, could I quickly come back to Ian and perhaps Andreea about, you know, Shafak, you talk about this ecosystem is still relatively unaware of some of these instruments, etc. But Andreea, you mentioned earlier, we've had 14, 15 years of experience, you know, so let's not reinvent the wheel. What are some of the key lessons learned and guidance? No, Ian, you start off first. What are some of the things that you think might be useful for the ecosystem here to be aware of, to really help not make the same mistakes, help save them time, help do it better?
I first want to start with saying that for me the social impact bonds are a tool for the future. If you look at what the United Nations has estimated, about $5 to $7 trillion to meet the SDGs for 2030 on a yearly basis, that money doesn't exist. But if we can upscale SIPs, then the money is reimbursed and they can reinvest it. So we create like a positive loop of capital that can be reinvested time after time. So at that time we can create the needs for the SDGs. So you can look at it as a grant that is reimbursed and that can be reinvested again. And as an investor, you're investing in impact and not merely in organizations, and that makes a big difference too. But it also suits the SDGs. It fits into the CSR policies. And when we look at the ESGs, investors find their way to invest in the E and the G, but the S is a complex, difficult matter. And there also can social impact bonds be of help. But still a lot of things need to be done. So what can be at help? That is a structural framework to facilitate implementation, the guideline of SIPs. We are now talking about integrating the Turkey experience and translating the guideline into Turkish. But to partner up the SIP participants, the stakeholders, government, investor, and service provider, it's still a complex matter because they are so different. And there is not one organization that can solve the problem on its own. So we need each other. And to partner up with these stakeholders, that has to be done based on trust, what you mentioned before. So based on trust, when you create trust, you create ease, and when there is ease, it doesn't cost so much. So if you want to create impact for a better world, the trust is a new currency.
Thanks, I like that. Trust is a new currency. Andreea, could I, a minute or so, what resources should people be aware of?
Do I only get 1 minute? I would just, if I may, so, okay, two things, maybe 2 minutes. So, because your first question, I think it's more exciting on how do we build an ecosystem, building on the enthusiasm we're seeing in Turkey. I think, firstly, raise the awareness, share the learning, share the experience, and be very deliberate about your learning agenda. Often the stakeholders directly involved in a project will tell us, well, we've learned so much from doing it, it's going to be so much easier next time round, but don't be selfish with your learning. And I know Bridges and Dalberg, they're brilliant with sharing with a whole community of practice, share with other government institutions across ministries, and really foster that culture of like very active learning, but also crucially make sure you capture it as well. In the UK, certainly there's quite a bit of sort of churn of civil servants. People move around from one department to another quite a bit. So you want to make sure you're building your institutional knowledge really around this sort of innovative practice. So that's something that I feel really passionate about, and related to that is thinking about the long-term capacity building. I think we've all been saying it's not about getting one pilot off the ground, it's about embedding some good practice within the way we fund social programs. So being outcomes oriented, being data led, very active performance management. In my view, and we're based in a school of government at Oxford University, the really long-term gain is to help embed some of that practice into the business as usual, if you like. And then finally on the second question, how do we find out more, where do we get more information? When we started at the Government Outcomes Lab 8 years ago, obviously there were fewer projects than today, and all the information was scattered all over the place. So the Prime Minister at the time asked us, GOLab, do impact bonds work? And then we thought we can't even do research on this because there's very little data. So what we started, so this was back in 2017-18, is we started developing from the ground up an international data collaborative. So we've been working across the field with so-called data owners, organizations like Bridges, but also government departments, both in the UK and internationally, to try to get as much data as possible about impact bonds all over the world. And again, we're getting that not so we can keep it within the ivory tower of Oxford for research purposes, but we're making all of it publicly available on our knowledge hub. Come and talk to me. I don't have a QR code on the screen, but I have one on my business card. So if you're interested to access more information on impact bond projects across the world, and alongside that sort of very granular project level data, we've also worked with a community of practice to develop an awful lot of technical guidance, how to measure outcomes, how to evaluate impact bonds, also a collection of case studies. So we're really like trying to move from kind of generating evidence for the sake of it to making sure it's actually helping doers, practitioners, pioneering government officials, and so on. So the Government Outcomes Lab, I guess, I have to do this shameless plug. It's a really good source of information for anyone interested in the field, if I may say so myself.
Yes, you may, and I'd second that. And again, I have not been paid for product placement either. But do visit the Government Outcomes Lab website, the Indigo database, etc. Wealth of information. You can really leapfrog a lot of the early stages and the painful stuff. Very inspirational content, but I just want to come back to you, Shafak, because you're such a key player here. You are such an inspirational person. You're a magnet for bringing us all in here today. What's your vision for where you want the ecosystem here in Turkey to be?
Well, first of all, the Ministry of Industry and Technology is on board. It's something. The minister was here, kind enough to do the opening yesterday, and we had a very short conversation afterwards. And the ministry is committed to, I mean, we have their, I do not want to use the wrong words now because there are people from the ministry, but we have the word from the ministry to scale up the project. So this is the pilot, and I think we are going to see the results by the end of the year. And we have their word, the ministry's word, to scale it up. And I was talking about the strategy documents. For the years 2022 and 2023, the theme of the development agencies was youth unemployment. So that was our kind of carrot. So we could use that path to build on the blocks. And for 2024, it's women empowerment. But I see that as we have their word, they're still interested in youth unemployment, and we will scale it up. Women empowerment is now, in the strategy, in the plan, I assume. And also, Turkey has received a loan from the World Bank for the climate change agenda, which means these resources may go or will go for green skills, as Gagandeep also mentioned. And there has been a lot of conversations around these themes now. There's appetite, and other than the ministry is on board, the ministry is also encouraging other government agencies to follow this path. So it's tested and approved, which is something. Now the product is known, and we are expecting to see more and more SIBs, DIPs, development impact bonds as well among foundations. That's one area that we would like to tap as EYDK, because foundations, there's an opportunity there for especially big foundations to be a part of a DIP, either being an investor or an outcome payer. And we're just sailing.
That's wonderful. That's so exciting. I think it's such exciting times to be in this part of the world and seeing what's happening here. The openness to ideas, to innovating, just opens up all these new vistas that are so exciting to explore. And I'm just going to end with, you hear SDGs come up all the time during the past 2 days, right? And sure.
Sorry, it's a shameless plug as well. So one thing that I think will help the ecosystem grow is the success of this pilot that we have with youth unemployment. So if anybody does need a young coder, please go and have a chat with Ejmal Bey here. The team has hundreds of them ready to go and ready to place. So yeah, that's my shameless plug.
Anyone else has a shameless plug to add? Oh, Gagandeep has a shameless plug. At least they're raising their hands and admitting to it, okay?
Not a shameless plug, but a plug. Shafak, you mentioned, youth unemployment and women empowerment. Actually, there's a way in which we can combine all of those strands also together. So in India, for example, the skill impact bond that runs, 62.5% of the beneficiaries are supposed to be women. If the number is lower than that, then the outcome payers don't pay the investor. So you can combine a lot of things. So excellent. I hope that's not a shameless plug. It's a plug.
It's a plug, okay. I'll let you get away with that. But back to the point I was making, everyone keeps talking about the SDG funding gap, and Ian, you just said something about that as well. And what I always point out to people is we have spent more than 800% of what we thought was needed in 2015 with the SDGs, okay? We have spent more than 800 times that, and we're only 12% of the way. So this isn't just an issue about more money. It's how do we make the money work better for outcomes. I know lots of people think about impact bonds as financial instruments. Yes, they are a financial innovation, but I like to call it a social movement because that's what it is. It's about changing lives front and center. And as part of a social movement, which I think all of you are, it's our responsibility to step up, make ourselves visible, join up so that we do better work together as a collective. And on that note, I want you to join me in thanking our brilliant panelists. And a big hand to all yourself, too, for staying engaged and awake after lunchtime. And not forgetting the army of logistical support. It's amazing what you guys are doing. Thank you. Teşekkür ederim. Thank you.